Hey, what's up? It's Tati, back with another review of Dark Side of the Ring, this time Season 4, Episode 4, What Happened to Doink the Clown. This episode focuses on the original Doink the Clown, which was Matt Borne. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but Doink the Clown had been portrayed by several different wrestlers after Matt Borne was fired by the WWF. Now, Matt Borne was a second-generation wrestler. His father was the legendary Portland wrestler Tough Tony Borne. Now, his father did raise him. After him and his wife split up, his wife said right in front of Matt that she wanted nothing to do with that little bastard. And I do believe that comment and hearing that statement from his mom directly is the root of all his problems and all his demons. Now, Matt was also known as Maniac Matt outside the ring simply because he was very heavily into narcotics and drugs and also drinking alcohol. He was hardly ever sober, and people find it really difficult to work with Matt, whether it be promoters or fans or even wrestlers. He was really difficult to work with, and people do state that, you know, because of him being somewhat really crazy in real life, that helped the success of the original Doink the Clown. So Matt Borne has 2 runs in the WWF, and during his first run, he was featured in WrestleMania 1 against the legendary Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Now, he does spend majority of his career going from territory to territory, where he is somewhat successful. He's a great worker. However, at times, his alcohol use, his drug use would get him into trouble where he ultimately would end up getting fired. Now, in this interview, we do have Mick Foley, who's on the show, who normally says nice things about people. Even when he's saying something that they've done that's negative, he tries to say things in a way where he doesn't come off mean. But then we have Tom Pritchard, we have Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and we have B. Brian Blair. None of these guys are shying away for how they really feel about who Matt Borne really was. So B. Brian Blair had heard of Matt Borne, but he had never seen him before. And the first night that they met, it was at a bar, and Matt seemed to have been either drugged up or maybe he was drinking a lot of alcohol. And he turned to Brian and he told him that, hey, I know you're messing with my girl. Brian denies this. He doesn't even know who his girlfriend is. He doesn't want any problems with Matt. When he turns around, Matt attacks him from behind and they get into a fight. Now, both of them are down on the ground, and Matt is trying to use his teeth to bite onto Brian's nose. Once Brian sees this, he actually bites onto Matt's tongue and rips a little piece off and ends up spitting it out somewhere. Now, these two go at it for a while, up until the point that Brian had, I guess, knocked him out for a few minutes. Brian, he goes, sits at the bar, and everybody act like, hey, nothing happened. Then out of the blue, Matt gets right back up, and he attacks Brian from behind again. But this time, he's reaching over to Brian's eye to pull it out of his face. Once Ivan Koloff sees this, he's like, enough is enough. You can't go for someone's eye. He ends up kicking Matt in the face. That ends up knocking him out, and the fight is over. But even more crazier, Hacksaw Jim Duggan is talking about one night after a match in Mid-South Wrestling. Hacksaw is taunting the crowd, and one of the fans ends up hitting him. Now, this isn't something that is unusual. Back in the day, sometimes fans try to make a name for themselves and get physical with the wrestlers. So this guy, he hits Jim, and Jim hits him back, get to a little scuffle, and then Matt decides to insert himself into the situation by kicking the guy in the face. And with him kicking this guy in the face, it cracks his orbital bone, which is this bone right here around the eye socket. And when it cracked, his eye ball just flew right on out. This guy, obviously being seriously injured, he ends up suing Mid-South Wrestling and also Jim and Matt. And from this, Mid-South did let go of Matt, but they did keep Jim Duggan since he really wasn't the aggressor in the situation. Sure, the fan was the aggressor here, but Matt did not have to insert himself and violently hurt the fan, since the fan did not, hurt him first. So Matt spent a few more years going from territory to territory. Before 1991, he joined WCW, and he had his Big Josh gimmick. Do you remember that? If you don't, it's for good reason. Now, during his Big Josh gimmick, he actually meets his first wife, who's out in the crowd. He invites her backstage, wants to get to know her, and then within 3 months, they move in together, and later they had his first child. He had a daughter. Now, he was so fucked up on either drugs and alcohol that when his daughter was being born, he made it just in the nick of time, but he was nowhere near sober, so he could not enjoy his firstborn's birth. Now, fast forward to 1992, he has left WCW, and now he is on his way to WWF. Now, at first, he does not debut as Doink the Clown. He does debut as himself, Matt Borne, but then Vince McMahon has come up with a wacky idea of him being a heel clown, which you can argue that is successful, but during this time, I don't think he thought that there was anything big going to come out of this, and it actually turned out to be really successful. Now, people during this time, and even today, people are scared of clowns. Kids are scared of clowns. Adults are scared of clowns. There's something creepy about them, and Matt Borne was able to make it work in the WWF. Now, during his run as Doink the Clown, it was successful, and it was positively received by the fans, even those that were afraid. However, behind the scenes, he was still getting into drugs and alcohol and getting into trouble. And the WWF knew that this was going on, but did not fire him right away. Fast forward to 1993, WrestleMania 9, one of the worst WrestleManias. We don't even have to get into it. But we do have Doink the Clown versus Crush. And during that match, we do have a second Doink the Clown that gets involved. I don't even need to talk about this. This is one of the worst pay-per-views. But either way, once he realized that they had added another Doink onto that match, especially at WrestleMania, he definitely felt like Vince McMahon was going to end up removing him from WWF, letting him know that, hey, all I gotta do is put makeup on somebody else and someone else can portray this character. And that's what ended up happening. By December of 1993, he ends up getting fired. Now, he is so depressed from being let go, from going from millionaire to jobless. Him and his wife and his daughter, they're all living together. And during this time, he is getting even more into drugs and more into alcohol. He becomes physically abusive, not only with his wife at the time, but also with his daughter that was only a few months old. And she has had it up to here with his abuse, and she ends up leaving him. She wants nothing to do with him and the daughter as well. Now, she is interviewed for the show, and she does talk about her experiences with Matt, but his daughter is not featured into this story. Only his daughter from his second marriage, who had some good things and some bad things to say, but ultimately everyone said how he was really difficult to work with and have relationships with because of how violent he was due to him never being sober. So now Matt has gone from living with his wife and daughter in $1 million home where he had a bathtub engraved in 18-karat gold, the word Doink on it. Insane, right? So now he has nothing, and he is living from paycheck to paycheck, doing a regular job like the rest of us, and he ends up meeting his second wife. Now, his second wife, when he meets her, he tells her that he's Doink the Clown, thinking that she would know who that is. She doesn't know. As a matter of fact, she thinks wrestling is fake. Me personally, I would hate to have a partner who would think wrestling is fake. I don't think I can do it. But they end up getting together. And unfortunately, she does admit that even though they had a lot of great moments together and she fell in love with him, she ignored a lot of red flags. She knew about the drugs. She knew about the alcohol use. And she knew about the narcotics as well. But she just look away from all that. He was working real hard at his job. He didn't allow for her to work, and he was very overprotective of her. And at first, I guess she thought that that was a good thing, but then she later realized that it wasn't. So one night, the two of them were in a bar together, and her ex-boyfriend showed up, and he spit on her. Now, Matt doesn't see this part, but she is telling him, bro, you need to leave, because she knows that Matt, in a split second, that he'll turn crazy. Now, he does get really upset at this guy for just talking to her. He ends up lifting him up by his earlobe, and he's going to get physical with him, but this guy ends up running to his car, and right when he's about to drive off, Matt lifts his car from the back, and he lifts it, and you could just hear the engine going off. This guy is trying to haul ass with the car, but Matt is holding onto this car. They call the police arrest him, and he's getting physical with the police as well. He got so physical when he was in the jail that he ends up ripping the sink right off the wall at the jail cell, and he, they end up putting a news article about him and how he was being erratic and attacking people. And this was not new for people who knew Matt Borne, because this is often behavior that he would perceive. Now, after this situation, he does try to, go back into wrestling, but certain companies, even smaller indie companies, don't want to work with him. They know how difficult it is for him to work with other people. However, he makes his break in 1994 into ECW. Now, he goes to ECW and he's Doink the Clown again. Now, this is not well received with the ECW fans, because you guys know ECW fans were very anti-WWF. So they didn't give two shits about him being Doink the Clown. And later on, he changes the gimmick a little bit, where he's like half Matt, half Doink, and he is known as Borne again. Now, part of the reason why he had to do this was because Vince McMahon is hearing that Matt Borne is still using this character, and for copyright purposes, he doesn't want him to use the character. So Vince McMahon is sicking his lawyers out on Matt Borne. But during this time, since Matt had left WWF, he has never received any residual checks from his time in WWF. So he was like, hey, pay me monthly my residuals, and I will stop using Doink. So that was basically the trade-off. He got his monthly check from Vinnie Mac, and he was able to drop the character. However, things didn't really get so successful for him in ECW. It just wasn't working out. He ends up having 2 more kids, and he's struggling to fit into the world of professional wrestling. But wrestling has changed a lot, especially in the 90s, and he's just having a really tough time. And that leads him to get more into drinking alcohol, doing narcotics, and getting into cocaine and all types of crazy drugs. And one day he comes home and he confronts his second wife. By this time, they already had 2 other children, and he accuses her of cheating, and he beats her so bad that she could not open her eyes for 2 weeks, and he also broke her nose. Now, once he's released from jail sometime later, he sees her face, and he is shocked because he actually doesn't even remember putting a finger on him. Now, she ends up taking him back, but then later on ends up leaving him when she just had enough of his shit. She just said, you know what, I'm not taking anything. I'm just taking the kids and we're leaving. And he said, okay, I understand. And she was so shocked because that was the first time that she felt understood by Matt. So years has passed, and Matt is still trying to make it in professional wrestling. He does have some matches in the indie scenes, and, do the typical signing autographs and taking pictures with fans. Now, one particular night, he does have a match with Jim Duggan. Now, they had already planned out this match, and right before they go out to have this match, Matt says, hey, I'm going to come out and hit you with a chair, and then you hit me with a 2x4, and we just get into it. And Jim was like hesitating. He was like, no, let's stick to the original plan. Let's not go off script. However, during this match, he ended up going off script, And Jim was like, hey, if you really want to fight, we can take it to the back. You know, Jim is a typical baby face. He don't want nothing to look bad when it comes to his reputation in front of the fans, whether it's in front of thousands or maybe just like 100 people or whatnot. So he doesn't really want to get into it in front of the fans with Matt. But Matt, he's really upset. And it turns out that Matt is upset about what happened almost 30 years ago when he ended up kicking that fan in the face and getting sued and ultimately getting fired from Mid-South Wrestling. And for whatever reason, he felt like Jim was to blame for that. And to be honest, I don't see how. He did end up getting a chair and wanting to attack Jim with it, but he ends up leaving the show, not even finishing the match. And from there, he tries to still get into the indie scenes, but obviously promoters are not really wanting to work with him, especially for little stunts like that. He does meet a new girl, someone who used to be part of wrestling as well. I forgot her name, but they have a relationship. They live together. She does say that with him there was also red flags too, but she let the good outweigh the bad and all that stuff. Now, fast forward to 2013, when he passes away. Unfortunately, his ex-wife and his daughter end up fighting about it on TV, on TMZ. So they ended up contacting his current girlfriend at the time, and she admits that, yes, he had passed away. And obviously, they're devastated. Now, according to his ex-wife and his daughter, they do believe that his girlfriend at the time was responsible for his death. Now, at first, I'm like, I don't really see how it's possible that he could have just had an overdose. But as they're interviewing her for this episode, I'm starting to feel a little bit convinced that something must have happened that made her probably helped him overdosed. So the night before Matt died, he calls his ex-wife, his second ex-wife, and tells her that he's tired of his girlfriend's shit and that he's going to leave her. And the next day is when he ends up passing away. So according to his girlfriend at the time, she says she went to the kitchen and heard him moaning, told him to turn around, and once he finally turned around, he got on one knee and asked her to marry him. She said no. And then he said, can you go in the room and get my glasses? I can't see without my glasses. That was the first thing that I heard her say. And I was like, okay, that's weird. So she goes to the room to look for the glasses, and she noticed that some of her mother's hospice medicine is missing. Her mom is doing hospice at home, so she's taking a lot of hard drug at the home, including liquid morphine. Now, when she realizes the medication is gone, she goes and confront him, and then she goes to bed. Later on that night, she gets a knock on the door. It's the neighbors, and the neighbors are like, what the hell is Matt doing out here? He's drunk. He needs help. If you don't bring him inside, we're going to call the police. So she brings him inside. She puts him on a couch, and she goes back to bed. 6 a.m., her alarm clock goes off like it does every single day. She found him on the couch, foaming at the mouth, and then she goes back to bed. By 9 a.m., she sees that he looks worse on the couch. She calls a friend, tells the friend, can you hear him making this sound? And she puts the phone next to his fucking mouth so she can hear what sound he's making. And the friend says, call 911 immediately. And this was around 9 o'clock. So over 3 hours had passed and this bitch did nothing. So the family, his ex-wife and his daughter obviously believes that there was some foul play going on. Even if she didn't assist with him overdosing, she did not help right away when he was under distress. Now, I'm no behavior analyst or whatever, but I felt like something about this was not truthful. Number one, she didn't seem to convey any emotions talking about this. And then her story was just not straight. What she said was about her alarm clock going off at 6 a.m. like it does every day. And what she said was when she saw him foaming at the mouth, she immediately called her friend, had the friend listen to the sounds he was making, and then called 911. If that was the case, then he would have gotten picked up by EMS around 6 in the morning. However, they end up making it around 9 o'clock, after a few minutes after the call had came in. And then she told other people that she ended up going back to bed when she initially woke up at 6 a.m. So no matter what, the story don't seem consistent. She didn't really seem to be saddened or anything about what happened. And it seems like regardless of what happened, you kind of help him die. He could have gotten help that whole time. By the time the EMS came, he was still alive and not dead. So that whole time they could have pumped his stomach, they could have did something that could have ended up saving him. And like I said, just seeing her talking about this just really made me feel like something about this ain't right. Now, he does die from an overdose. They did find all types of drugs in his system. And then he also had an enlarged heart, which was 6 times the size of what a normal heart should be. The family obviously suspect foul play, but the detective did look further into his death, and they concluded that there was no foul play. There's no evidence at all, so they cannot say that his girlfriend had anything to do with this. Now, unfortunately, I really do feel like Matt could have been really successful in pro wrestling had he had not, time and time again, go back to drinking and doing all types of drugs or whatnot. As far as his death, something about it at first made me feel like, the family is just, reaching for something that is probably not true. But just hearing his girlfriend's side of what happened really made me feel uncomfortable. I really feel like she just knew what was happening and just decided not to act on it as soon as possible. And that right there could have saved his life. Unfortunately, he's another wrestler who had faced a lot of demons and could not get the proper help in time before they passed away. This was a really great episode, and if you do get a chance to see it, or if you saw it and you heard how his girlfriend talked about his death, put down below, what do you think? Do you really feel like she had something to do with it, or she just completely ignored it up until the point that he was definitely going to pass away from this overdose? I really like this episode. Next week we have an episode about the junkyard dog, so this is going to be really, really good. Can't wait to see it. Guys, thanks so much for watching my review. I'll be back tomorrow with Dynamite.